It's back to school season, and my team and I at RPG, the same folk who produce this podcast, we're talking about shopping malls, and more specifically, why we're down to about two decent ones in the St. Louis area. The St. Louis Galleria, which is just down the street from our office, and it used to be the prestige mall for our area, and it's fallen on hard times, and the West County Mall, which has turned from being one that hardly anyone went to into one that attracts people from all over the metro area. Now, the other malls that remain open are all struggling, and unless they can find different ways to utilize their space, I suspect they'll probably follow the same fate as all of the ones that closed. But it wasn't always like this. When I was growing up, there were at least a dozen full-size shopping malls here in the metro area. Some of them, like the Jamestown Mall, Crestwood Plaza, Northwest Plaza, St. Louis Center, and Chesterfield Mall, are completely gone now. Others, like the Mid-Rivers Mall, Alton Square, South County Mall, and St. Clair Square are all still around, but they're not the draws that they used to be for retail shoppers. And then there's Union Station, which used to be a full-size downtown mall that brought in all sorts of locals and tourists, but which is now mostly empty, while a portion that used to be the food court and the showcase known as the Fudgery is taken up now by the aquarium and the theme park rides outside. Now, here's the thing. When I travel, I still see malls in operation, and a lot of them are actually pretty busy. The business model is still viable in certain parts of the world, particularly in cities where shopping centers can be built into skyscrapers, repurposed into buildings, or placed underground. But research from Capital One says that 87% of shopping malls in the United States are destined to die in the next 10 years, and I think it's a good idea for us to take a step back and ask, why? I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. Shopping malls as we know them today really derive from the 1950s, and while we can point to all sorts of marketplaces or bazaars and ancient cultures that were mall-like, what most of us would recognize as a shopping mall today hails back to 1956 in Edina, Minnesota, when the Southdale Center was built to be the first enclosed, climate-controlled shopping mall in the United States. And this makes sense when you understand that Edina is in the Twin Cities metro area of Minneapolis-St. Paul, and that Minnesota is a place where, and not a dig, but if I can put it charitably, ice fishing and dog sled season are as big a deal to the folks there as summer beach season is in the warmer climates. Southdale Center was designed to replicate the idea of European arcades, not the video game variety, but the shopping districts, where people could eat, drink, gather, and chat while they had easy access to shops and services. The original idea, planned by architect Victor Gruen, was to eventually expand the mall concept to include residences and medical offices and other non-commercial tenants, but of course, that's not exactly the direction in which things evolved. Well, what was the alternative, you might wonder? In a city, there was often a commercial district lined with retail businesses ranging from boutique shops to department stores, and one of those, Dayton's, was actually headquartered in Minneapolis, and it was the family that owned that chain that helped finance and develop the Southdale Center. They even designed their department store in the mall, what we now call an anchor store, to match the design of their flagship store downtown. Now, Dayton's is not a familiar brand to most people today because their department stores don't exist anymore, but you probably do know them for another brand that they launched in 1962, the retail chain Target, for which the Dayton Corporation has been named since they became the Target Corporation in 2000. And that's pretty incredible to think that they launched both a shopping mall and one of the primary general merchandise chains in America. But let's go back to Southdale Center because the original concept situated the mall between Dayton's and another anchor store called Donaldson's. As the mall began to fill up, JCPenney wanted in, and a new section of the mall had to be built to accommodate them, along with a new corridor leading to the store, and this opened in 1972. Meanwhile, just across the street, a developer named Don Gabbert decided to build a similar concept built around Gabbert's furniture store. This new shopping center, called the Galleria, opened in 1976, and it gradually morphed into becoming an upscale mall to compete with the broader mass market concept Southdale Center had pioneered. These two malls formed the template for an explosion of enclosed suburban shopping malls across the United States. And the term shopping mall was coined by the Bergen Mall in Paramus, New Jersey, which was built in 1957, initially with an open-air design, but which was enclosed in the 1970s. Now, obviously, the name stuck both as a common part of the names of other shopping centers and also in the generic sense where a mall became a known quantity. I can't emphasize enough how transformative shopping malls were for the United States in the 60s and 70s. They moved retail commerce out of crowded downtown commercial districts and allowed people to shop comfortably in places closer to home. Shopping malls were monolithic and tended to attract large crowds who just wanted a place to spend time in an all-weather environment. And the fact that many malls started attracting new branches for national branded stores helped to spread new fashions and styles a lot more quickly across the country than the old days of department stores and catalog sales had. But by the 1980s, there were around 2,500 malls in existence in the United States, which averages out to about 50 per state, though obviously there were a lot more in populated states along the eastern and western coasts, and then in the more sparsely populated areas of the Midwest, South, and West. Where you'd tend to see the most malls were in the suburbs of big cities or in communities that were large enough to draw in people from a wide area. And there's a reason, for example, that the larger cities that exist in central Illinois, like Peoria, Bloomington Normal, Decatur, Champaign-Urbana, and Springfield, still have active shopping malls. And the same is true for Missouri, where you'll find malls in cities like Branson, Columbia, Jefferson City, Hannibal, and Cape Girardeau. These shopping centers still draw people in because the alternatives are generally stores like Dollar General, Walmart, Rural King, or Target. But a lot of these malls aren't too impressive today, and some are on absolute life support. I've been into malls where broad swaths of retail space have been taken over by other types of institutions like churches, colleges, healthcare organizations, indoor amusement centers, or even government offices. All of these types of organizations benefit from the large parking lots and infrastructure already available, so it does make sense. The most extreme case of pivoting is probably, at least locally, the St. Louis Mills Mall, which opened in the mid-2000s with lots of excitement and huge crowds because of a large attached ice rink where the Blues would practice, a NASCAR go-kart track, an indoor skate park, a glow-in-the-dark mini golf course, and a state-of-the-art movie theater. Believe me, I remember how crowded it was when it opened because I helped open a store there. But 20 years later, the property was gutted and turned into a warehouse and business park, and only the Cabela's anchor store remains. So let's return to our statistic about 87% of malls being likely to go under in the next 10 years, and let's explore why. For most people, the answer is simple. Online retailers have killed malls with cheaper prices, but I don't find that answer very satisfying personally because many of the stores that still exist in malls have managed to coexist with online sales and have even developed e-commerce platforms of their own. Price alone is not the issue. There's something misaligned about the experience. So let's first see where malls are dying off. Well, there was a Newsweek article from last year that included a map that showed where malls tended to be the most threatened. And many of the areas shown are around big cities: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, Nashville, Denver, Jacksonville, and Boston. And what I find interesting about this is if you were to look at a population map and see where people are migrating to and from in the United States, a lot of the areas where these shopping malls are located are areas where out-migrations are happening. In other words, many people, especially younger people, are moving away from the malls, and as a result, they're no longer as convenient as they once were. Consumers are not willing to drive to malls that don't offer a variety of stores and a wide selection of products and experiences. In the 1980s and 90s, malls often had all sorts of draws to bring people in: toy stores, bookstores, science and nature stores, gadget stores, electronic stores, pet stores, eyeglasses stores, and so forth. Many malls today primarily focus on clothing stores with very little else to appeal to other shoppers beyond accessories like jewelry and shoes. And while I'm not arguing the older formats need to come back, they died off for a reason, there are definitely markets that malls could be serving with new creative concepts, which they are currently not. And since many malls are themselves distressed or even underwater in terms of operational costs, there's opportunity for community governments and small business development programs to start looking for ways to incubate these new concepts rather than to put all of the risk on entrepreneurs or on large corporations. Pop-up shops and more affordable retail options like stalls or kiosks can help businesses to grow, but malls can also reconfigure their retail space to lower the barrier to entry and make it easier for retail businesses to get started by adding in smaller storefront spaces or partnering with local organizations to host events to draw in foot traffic. The second issue is that the COVID pandemic trained a lot of people to shop online, and home delivery has never been easier or offered consumers more favorable pricing or return policies. Big retail chains like Target and Walmart didn't move exclusively to online sales. They instead doubled down on the technology they'd already been developing to allow customers to place online orders and pick them up at counters or in drive-up lanes. Mall retailers, by contrast, didn't do that as capably, and even those who did offer in-store pickup still required you to find a spot, park, go into the mall, and then enter their store to pick up your item. Ordering from the apps offered by these same retailers tended to result in faster, easier home delivery. This explains why the numbers show a huge swing from people buying items in person prior to the pandemic to simply making purchases online. The business model didn't allow for the convenience. But malls still had, and still have, an edge in allowing customers who want an item to purchase it and have it right away. And that's why you see more urban malls struggling the most, while the suburban and regional ones are still hanging in there. If you go to a mall in a busy city like New York or Chicago, you'll not only face huge crowds, but also find frequent stockouts and staff who aren't able to help you beyond selling you what's on the shelf that day. The entire strength of malls, which is allowing you to have what you want when you want it and to physically handle it and perhaps even try it on before you buy it, is lost when the supply chain can't keep up, but people can jump on their phones and order what they want online while they're standing in your store. But the retailers who are hanging in there or even thriving in malls have figured out a secret, and that's in offering a distinct and engaging experience that isn't easy to achieve online. So for example, the Chinese chain Miniso is thriving in malls and in urban commercial shopping districts because it offers popular low-cost goods from brands like Disney, Harry Potter, and Sanrio, and delivers an experience rooted in discovery and value. The retailer Lululemon, which is not exclusive to malls, is still a big draw within shopping malls because of its cult-like following among primarily female consumers, and this is a brand that's weathered quite a few PR storms over the last 2 decades. The reason people still love to shop there is for the experience. Women often report the environment in the store as positive and affirming, engaging, energetic, and visually stimulating. Retailers like Hot Topic and Box Lunch have become masters of using bounce-back coupon offers to bring shoppers back to their stores and to redeem discounts within a few weeks of purchases. And of course, the Lego store, which is selling the exact same products you can get at any other store that sells Lego branded merchandise, attracts customers who really just want to make a pilgrimage to visit one of their favorite brands and be utterly surrounded by it. In other words, stores that compete on service, value, and customer engagement still tend to do pretty well, and they can command the higher prices often associated with shopping in malls. But is that enough to sustain the model? Well, I would argue maybe yes, because research is showing that Gen Z is starting to love malls, and the greatest increase in mall traffic are coming from people in this age group. Malls offer an alternative to all of the other things that people switch to in order to get away from going to the mall, but those things have stopped offering, like nice indoor spaces, ample choices for browsing and shopping, food courts, and places to just sit and hang out. The problem, though, is that Gen Z is also able to go into malls and find similar products easily online, and so the stores that are catering to them need to offer fun experiences and instant gratification by making purchases easy and fun. Department store anchors and traditional mall retailers like jewelry stores, boutiques, and shoe shops aren't well aligned with this generation, but amusement centers, experiences, stores that offer items seen on social media, and pop culture-focused stores definitely are. So are stores like Walmart, Target, and Costco, which you sometimes see in malls. Another thing we need to acknowledge is that malls traditionally sold a sort of conformity by insisting on a monoculture. You could go into a lot of malls around the country and find the same stores offering the same items. And while it was very popular in the 1980s, it doesn't match today's culture well. Likewise, I remember the surprise people felt back in the 1990s and early 2000s when they started realizing that many mall stores, in trying to be trendy, intentionally carried smaller sizes of clothing and were positioned only towards people of certain body shapes and sizes. That kind of exclusion of people doesn't fit in today's culture at all. Malls today need to offer things that are surprising and distinctive and interesting to continue to attract customers. They also need to have policies in place that promote public safety without being too restrictive, because the draconian policies many malls employ tend to chase customers away rather than attract them. Here in St. Louis, for example, malls have had to enforce curfews or age restrictions due to swells of younger people showing up on weekends looking for something to do, but the malls are ill-equipped to handle them and often treat them adversarially rather than trying to offer experiences, products, and services catered to their needs. This creates a dynamic where people are afraid to go to the mall at certain times, or where the malls have to close early for fear of rowdy groups being too hard to handle. There are solutions to these problems, and they often involve community engagement and involvement, as well as smart design. For example, in the mall just down the street from my house, Many of the worst incidents occur in the food court because large groups of people can congregate there. The solution is to break those bigger spaces up through smart design and to provide food businesses presence in smaller pockets of the mall, as opposed to offering a giant food court. Then use those bigger spaces for community attractions that can fill the space with positive purpose, not just groups of bored teenagers. Community spaces that draw in families and the broader community tend to naturally discourage teens from wanting to hang out in large, unsupervised groups and also justify a stronger presence for public safety officers and security policies. Shopping malls can also reconsider their role as a public square. The original design, if you recall, was intended to integrate other services and organizations, and that's still a possibility today. Portions of aging malls have been repurposed into many other things, including residential communities for senior citizens, government-run public recreation centers, or even offices for large businesses. As marketers, we of course should look at malls as well with an eye towards new and interesting ways they can be used. As Gen Z grows up and begins searching for that mall-like experience, I have a feeling there's going to be an enormous opportunity to reconfigure what this experience can look like and to determine how retailers can be successful in serving them. There's still plenty of opportunity out there for those with the eyes to see it. Well, I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. This month's plug is for KidSmart, a charitable organization based here in St. Louis, Missouri, with the mission of empowering children in need to succeed academically. And as we head back to school season, KidSmart will be out there handing out $104 million in school supplies to around 80,000 kids in the St. Louis area. They also operate a free education supply store and have a truck that brings school supplies directly into neighborhoods in need. As you might imagine, August is their Super Bowl, and they need both financial and volunteer support this month. So go to kidsmartstl.org to learn more.